Good morning. I love that Trevor Hall song. I know it was a little bit long, but I love Trevor Hall. And my sweetie knows, I tease him all the time that Trevor Hall is my pretend boyfriend. This morning I was playing this song and he's like, "This sounds familiar." Oh yeah, Trevor Hall. He's very patient with me this morning. So as Matt mentioned, there's been a lot of conversation and we've been talking about hearing about folks experiencing spiritual burnout or spiritual fatigue. And even for some, it feels like a spiritual crisis. So as I was preparing for my talk, I thought, well, I want to have a better understanding of why that happens and maybe some things that are helpful along that journey. And you know me, I talk about this all the time. I went down a rabbit hole and I'm like, ooh, this. But I found a really good article from a woman, and I'm praying that I'm pronouncing her name correctly. It's Vashundra. And she has a website called My Spiritual Shenanigans. So and she has like a blog and lots of courses and all kinds of things. And the article is called Why Our Spiritual Path Can Seem Difficult and How We Can Simplify the Journey. She says, so often we resist what we discover. And it may be because we grow up in a world of science and proof. And possibly we don't want to get stuck into any of those forbidden concepts of how the spiritual realm works. And of course, we don't ever want to appear crazy or insane. So, but in the process of that, we can move away from some of our truths. So many of us that are seeking do it. We have a logical mind, a very active logical mind. And we want to make sense of things before we believe them. And sometimes what we're learning or reading can go against what we've learned as of yet, and then so we can resist. And that's when our spiritual path can become difficult or complicated, is when we approach it from that logical mind. And the author calls it the ego mind. Our minds are limited to our human bodies. So with that, we have limitations, like our ability to perceive or understand something that is more subtle than itself. And although this resistance is common and understandable, it can disrupt our spiritual growth and potentially even destroy it. We learn a lot of things in school as we're growing up, and often it doesn't include any of those fundamental questions. And we've talked about those things here before, about life or even death. Like, what's the purpose of life? Or what happens after we die? Or have I met these people before? And some of us explore these questions or attempt to find these answers after many years of not doing so we can feel a little uncomfortable. And there's an irony in this because we find it odd to be ourselves, and the author says our own nature doesn't seem familiar. But we can have patience and know that all these strange experiences that we have will eventually make sense. And she lists 5 ways to make sense of our spiritual journey. So the first thing she shares is building our spiritual foundation, which we do talk about here often. Faith doesn't just happen overnight. It's not like we can just meditate for an hour or journal here and there and expect to build a connection with the divine or with the universe or source. It takes time, just like any authentic and important relationship. That connection or that oneness with God or the universe needs to be cultivated and nurtured. And we can do that through repetition or ritual. Because when we do something long enough, then it can become our nature. And some things happen almost instantly. And we're like, yes, I'm on to something special. And we are. But building our spiritual foundation can help us feel and understand all of those ins and outs of what some call that cosmic way. Have you ever found yourself in that space of, I don't really need to pray or meditate? And then you realize that divine connection is getting weaker. And you don't feel as spiritual as you used to be? Because we can meditate several times in a day. We can practice yoga. We can journal. And then adversity hits us and our foundation crumbles and our faith shatters. And then we can think, well, what's the point? Like, why am I investing all this time and all this energy if I'm still meant to undergo suffering? Our connection with the universe, the divine, will only deepen with this direct practice and with dialogue. We have that opportunity to understand the workings of the universe at a deeper level. So how do we build this foundation, faith? As we learn to investigate and acknowledge our doubts, we can move from creating problems in our mind to looking for those solutions. And sometimes those solutions come through research and scientific proof, and that way we support our faith around logic or through logic. Other times we learn or we see or we hear or we feel different forms of that divine guidance. And this allows us to affirm our faith when it feels like it's starting to waver. We can illuminate or light up our protective mind through spiritual education. So whatever practice or method that we follow can be our guide through those times of adversity or darkness or confusion. And 2, she says, understand the trajectory of the path. We can ease that protection or resistance of our mind by understanding what comes next. And she equates it to not diving into the deep end of a pool if you don't know how to swim, or at least have some kind of a floaty. So if we have some kind of guidance or preparation of what potentially is going to happen next, it helps our mind know what to expect. And there is an importance of learning to be comfortable in the unknown and learning to surrender. But if that feels difficult for us sometimes, we can at least be prepared or feel more prepared. The author suggests that if we begin to understand the symptoms and the stages of a spiritual awakening, we can mentally prepare. And she says this doesn't suggest running out and getting, a ton of psychic readings so that you tell me what to do. Because what this can do is set us into a pattern of looking for that external validation. So we can take back our own power on this path, and we can go as hard as we want, we can go as gentle as we want. It's really up to us. But we eventually can build that faith that it takes to be uncomfortable in the unknown. But until then, we can explore things without focusing on that perfect outcome or being concerned that maybe we're wasting our time. Because all of this is helping our soul to expand. So we can allow that inner curiosity to take our awakening even deeper. So 3, she says, find like-minded people. Another reason we can feel that our spiritual path is so difficult is because we're attempting to do it alone. Or maybe we don't know how to find the right people to support us on this path. She says in the same way, don't be shy and hold back about speaking your truths to the world, because there's lots of people around us that are waking up, and we get the opportunity to walk beside them. And so I have had the personal experience of going at it alone or feeling like I was alone, and definitely feeling like people are going to think that I'm crazy. These things that I'm hearing and feeling and sensing can seem kind of nutty to some people. But I know that my loved ones, my friends, if they might not necessarily get it, but they definitely don't want to see me suffer or be in pain. Another way, of course, is social media. There's tons of groups out there on Facebook that revolve around spirituality. And it gives us the opportunity to ask questions and to see what other people are asking. And of course, finding a spiritual community. Really being in fellowship with the other members, with the ministers, and having conversations with those who actually do get it. And 4, she says, ask for help. So if we want to get to a destination from point A to point B. So say I want to go from Salem to Kaiser. I am not going to attempt to run. I'm not going to run there. I don't even run if I'm being chased. But I could take my vehicle. I could take my car to make it a little simpler. So we can apply that concept to our own growth. Our ego mind or our logical mind can have us believing that we need to have all the answers. Or maybe there's shame around asking for help. If we want to avoid delaying the process or lessening our frustration or our burnout, we can learn to ask for help. Because spirituality doesn't have to be about your suffering, glorifying your suffering, or being about martyrdom. We can ask the universe for help. We ask for answers and we ask for guidance. And just let the universe show up for us. The support can come from any direction. It can come from an article that we read, maybe from a stranger, or maybe that nudge or that tug that we need to get in contact with someone else, with someone we haven't talked to for a little while. Maybe it's even around getting mentored. So take a moment when you receive that help or support and acknowledge it instead of just brushing it off as a coincidence. Pages are stuck together. So when we take that moment to acknowledge the help or the guidance in gratitude, it allows us to retune our mind to trusting those divine forces that are looking after us. Because every time that we see evidence, our faith gets stronger. And 5, she says, find a spiritual path and stick to it. And I can attest to, I've jumped from book to book and teacher to teacher, and really they're all saying the same thing, at least the meat of it. Because the end goal is of course enlightenment, but there's so many milestones along the way. The milestones can vary too, maybe being more balanced, learning a healing modality, or learning more about our energy systems. So after researching or reading many books, you begin to identify the trend and gather a sense of, she says, what you should be doing. I don't like to use the word should, but what you could be doing, what you're invited to be doing. Then we ask, are we doing it? Because once we take that time and really practice and we digest those teachings, we can move from any of those feelings around being burnt out or being stuck. Another big reason she says that our spiritual path can feel so difficult is because subconsciously we're waiting for a miracle, a healing miracle to happen. And we often feel that spiritual high when we're in the beginning stages of our path. And that the author calls it beginner's luck. So we end up spending a lot of time trying to recreate that experience. But we can remember that we're having subtle experiences all the time, and they're just as important as those profound moments. So give yourself permission to slow down, allow those firsthand experiences of all the advice that you're getting. Take some time to try something out for a little bit, and if it helps you, great. If it doesn't, slowly move into a different modality or a different practice. Because remember, not everything is going to resonate with everyone. So create your own mix of spiritual tools, create your own spiritual toolbox, and find what works for you. Once we have an understanding, sometimes that we get in our own way, she calls it that we are our own enemy. Once we have an understanding around that, it makes our path more difficult. We can begin to understand a broader sense of direction, maybe which direction we should be going. And then things start to make more sense. And then we experience things with more ease. So let's just keep moving forward, trudging along this path, and allow the universe to show up for us. And I want to close with a little reading. So if you want to go into a meditative space or just close your eyes. And it's a book that Madge actually shared with us, the Jesus Calling. And so if it says God, Jesus, whatever resonates, whatever name you call your source. So this is actually for today, September 25th. Pour all of your energy into trusting me. It is through trust that you can stay connected to me, aware of my presence. Every step on your life journey can be a step of faith. Baby steps of trust are simple for you. You can take them with almost unconscious ease. Giant steps are another matter altogether. Leaping across chasms in semi-darkness, scaling cliffs or uncertainty, trudging through the valley of the shadow of death. These feats require sheer concentration as well as utter commitment to me. Each of my children is a unique blend of temperament, giftedness, and life experience. Something that is a baby step for you may be a giant step for another person, and vice versa. Only I know the difficulty or the ease each segment of your journey. Beware of trying to impress others by acting as if your giant steps are only baby ones. Do not judge others who hesitate in trembling fear before an act that would be easy for you. If each of my children would seek to please me above all else, fears of others' judgments would vanish, as would attempts to impress others. Focus your attention on your path just ahead of you and the one who never leaves your side. So I have a little story about this book real quick before I turn it over to Madge. I ran into Madge here. I was preparing for a class, and we were talking about my message today, and I'm like, gosh, I'm really kind of struggling how to end it. I'm not really sure. I'm usually really prepared, and Madge is, she says, well, sometimes I write my message the night before. Sometimes it just lands the morning of. And so this morning I was just like, I don't have a way to close. I don't know what I should close with. And so my sweetie and I were outside talking, and he said, sometimes when he chairs the meeting, he opens a book and there's a message there for him. I was like, hold on. So I ran into the house, and I had this book sitting out ever since you shared it, and my mom had given it to me in 2013. And so I was like, hold up. So I open it up to the September 25th. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. So it goes back to listening to those little nudges and just kind of lining those things up and not brushing them off as coincidence. There's a reason it was reintroduced to me, that it had been sitting out. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thanks for
I'm
sharing
happy
that.
about that.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, turn it over to Madge. Thank you.
You're welcome.